Welcome. I'm Kevin Miller. This is a podcast about how we make meaning of our lives and experience the miracle of living. In this episode, the benefits of high heat and discomfort. So when a book came across my desk about the benefits of heat, my first thought was, really? We've been in the age of cold plunges for quite a while, but now it's heat? I also wonder, does it take an entire book to explain this? And then I saw the author. It was Bill Gifford. Bill is a veteran magazine writer and editor who writes about extraordinary athletes and cutting edge health science. He's co-author of the #1 New York Times bestseller, Outlive, which I was well aware of. That book has sold more than 2 million copies, as well as the New York Times bestseller, Spring Chicken, Stay Young Forever, parentheses, or Die Trying. He's a longtime contributing editor to Outside. That's also where I know him well from. And his works appeared in Wired, Bloomberg Businessweek, Men's Health, Bicycling, The Washington Post, and others, as well as in Best American Sportswriting. He's got a book that's just come out called HOTWIRED: How the Hidden Power of Heat Makes Us Stronger. And in it, he does like all great journalists and shares his personal journey and real life experience, in this case with heat therapy. What I initially intrigued myself with was Bill's look into history, where we routinely experienced long periods of high heat. Air conditioning wasn't normal until the 1950s and 1960s. I remember times in the 80s of being in places, apartments that friends lived in that didn't have any air conditioning. I mean, we always had fire, the ability to heat up an environment and put some clothes on as well. But when it was hot, I mean, for the span of almost all existence, we adapted to that heat. So with Bill, we're discussing the issues around our seeming inability to deal with any discomfort like heat and how fragile we seem to be becoming in our culture. So while we can exist in temperature controlled environments almost entirely, and it may feel comfortable, is this existence best for our overall health and well-being? So coming up next, my discussion with Bill Gifford on longevity and health, and specifically then heat. Let's see how we can influence our meaning making of life for a better existence. Well, Bill, I was glad that your publishers said, Kevin, make sure you check out the last chapter of the book. Because as much as we're going to get in, and I do want to explore the concepts around the benefits of heat, your last chapter, and I know you've got a long history in longevity, but as we look at these, health hacks and the things to help our longevity, and I very much am vocal about, I want my health span to equate to my lifespan. And gosh, I'd really like to be here as long as I can because I'm enjoying life. But there's the point. What good is the heat therapy and the other therapy and the other hacks or whatever to help us live longer if we're not connected? And that's what I felt like was the message in the last part of your book, is that this heat stuff, really the best benefit maybe was you getting to sit around with a bunch of sweaty people who just connected. And maybe that was the best benefit. Fair?
I think so. I've written a lot of science books. I spent a lot of time with doctors and scientists. And for this book, it turns out I was spending a lot of time in bike shorts, in my bathing suit, sometimes less than a bathing suit, with other people in kind of in this relaxed environment of saunas and heat bathing. And I noticed I was making a lot of friends at a later stage in life, which, doesn't happen normally. So I started sort of looking at that, like what's going on here? Like, why am I making friendships on the sauna bench? And, It led me to think about the way heat bathing and those practices kind of take down our inhibitions. And I'm very introverted, so I have a hard time sort of talking to people and suddenly get me hot and I start chatting away. It's kind of funny.
Well, you made a mention, I think it was in that last chapter too, just the aspect of feeling connected to your body and to earth and kind of that primal feeling. And that makes up a lot of I'm going to call it my outdoor life, is just, just strap on. One of my favorite things is to be somewhere where it's warm enough, which it's not always up here, but to strap on a pair of shoes and a pair of shorts, and that's it, and go hit a technical remote trail. And I feel primal. And that feeling, though, almost, as I was reading your book, Bill, I love it as much or more than ever, but it almost feels weirder as time goes on, because we have a culture that is just, as you talk about in the book, we stay indoors, we stay temperature controlled. We're so disconnected. Here's something I'll offer to you, though. And I was thinking about it when I read your book. I continue to be enamored a bit with the amount of dystopian movies that are out, dystopian movies and shows where, something terrible happens, but there's no electricity and we're back to collecting water, hunting game, and wondered, is it kind of belying that we could kind of like to go back there to some degree?
Yeah. I mean, there's something sort of primitive and elemental about sauna in particular, right? You have a fire, you have wood, so it's like the energy from the sun is becoming fire. You have rocks, you have water, and then the water becomes steam in the air. So it's like bringing this sort of elemental, sort of recipe indoors in the frame of a sauna. And I think, it's such an ancient practice, right? And it's survived in Finland in particular, I think, because it's so cold. And I think it's a way of like bringing that heat of the sun into yourself when you can't get it outside.
Yeah.
Bringing the outdoors indoors.
Well, and the group concept of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have a friend who brought together a bunch of guys and started doing these every month. There'd be a Wednesday and we'd go out and do some adventure. And the guy's a financial advisor. So there's a lot of guys who are really well off, but little by little, there ended up being just kind of a mismatch of guys. And there are some that, money was not, they didn't have much at all. And being out there, though, but being out on a mountain bike ride, being out on a hike, being out surfing together or doing whatever, it kind of levels the playing field and you kind of forget about all that. Because like you're in a pair of swimming trunks or some Lycra, you're sweaty or you're freezing or whatever. And you get to just be a human with people.
Well, and you're part of the tribe too.
Fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
The humanity
and I think,
of it.
Like if you look at these heat bathing practices, like you would never fire up, in the woods of Finland, 150 years ago when my wife's family still lived there, like you wouldn't fire up the sauna by yourself, right? Or you wouldn't be alone for long because everybody else would come over and want to hang out. So it's a communal practice, and it kind of, it has its roots in the ancient Roman baths, which are really interesting. Those were communal and very democratic kinds of spaces, like where everybody would go. And, you'd go to get clean, but you'd also, and feel better, but you'd also meet people, have business deals, maybe, find a new friend or whatever, it was all about doing it together.
All right. Well, I'm going to back into that because, as you said, when I first saw the book, I admittedly, Bill, I'm going to tell you straight. I thought, oh, come on, seriously. After it's all cold plunges, as you know, cold plunges, cold showers. We've been doing that for so much, the Wim Hof, concept. I hear about it. And I'm not even a big fan of that. Now, I live at high altitude. Most of the time, we're cold to begin with. If we touch water, which we do, we'll jump in lakes and stuff. I mean, they're just barely beyond ice covered to start with. So I don't really try to inflict that on myself any more than I already have to. But then you come along and go heat. And I go, come on. Okay. But I got into the book. And well, go ahead and speak to that because it's one of the latter chapters. You talk about cold plunges specifically as well. So talk about both of them together.
Yeah. So, I came into this from kind of the same standpoint. Like I didn't love hot weather. I didn't love saunas. In fact, I'd known about these studies that we're going to talk about sauna and, reducing risk of heart attack. And I thought, well, okay, I don't feel like getting that hot, so I'm not gonna go down that rabbit hole. But yeah, cold plunges have been all the rage, and I'll admit a little bit of a bias. Similar to you, I feel like I don't really need to get that cold. But I found that the science, we like to claim that everything's science based, right? In this wellness world, and there's a little science behind benefits of cold, but it's weak. It's a little bit weak. It's not as robust as the science around heat.
Well, can we also look at it? I did think also in reading your book about just the ability or the kind of back to that primal thing, just to feel. We just want to feel. I mean, people go to horror films to feel. People, well, my gosh, on a negative side, people cut themselves to feel. There's so the desire in this disconnected world to feel. And so to that degree, I thought, well, I can see the extremes. You want to jump in freezing cold water or super hot just to remind yourself you're a human. So I get that as well. Fair?
Right. And cold adaptation is really critical to being humans. Like when the first people settled where you live and where I live, it was pretty darn cold, right? Often. And we don't have fur, right? Mm-hmm. And so staying warm and being able to tolerate cold was a legitimate struggle for our ancestors. And now, of course, we live in 70 degrees in my house. It's, and we want to stay here all the time, right? It's like San Diego, right? 70 all the time. Perfect climate. And we don't experience those extremes. And so we don't work out that natural adaptability that we have to both heat and cold.
Well, and I'll say I get to experience the extreme. So I live here. My house that I had lived in for 17 years, we were at 9,200 feet.
Oof.
And yeah, so I got really comfortable with the cold. I've got kids. I had, my gosh, what did I have? I had a bunch born there at that house, and my kids are cold weather kids. When it's 32 degrees, they're going to go to school in shorts. It's just kind of the common thing up here, very adapted. And then when we go see family in Florida, it's death. We are so unacclimated to it, which I frustrate myself with because I mean, as an athlete and stuff, I want to be adaptable, but my gosh, I have so acclimated to the cold that my heat adaptation is extremely poor. And now that I read your book, I realize it's even more poor. So I feel even worse about myself, Bill. Thanks.
Well, it's like your Florida family coming up to altitude. They're going to die too. Totally, and you're fine because, your hematocrit is like 52 or something because you live at 9,200 feet.
It is. I think I would test positive if I was still racing bikes. Yeah,
exactly. But, it's the humidity that's the real sort of butt kicker in that equation. Because if you came to Salt Lake, it's like 98 degrees in the summer on a hot day, but your sweat evaporates.
Yeah.
And so we're designed for these kind of hot but dry climates. And so we sweat, and then that sweat evaporates and it takes off a tremendous amount of heat. Thermal energy when that water evaporates from your skin.
Yeah.
So you can tolerate heat. You just can't tolerate the heat plus the humidity, which means your sweat can't evaporate.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you have one of the endorsements for your book from Michael Easter, which we had on the show recently.
Love
and he kind of referenced you in regards to his primary book, The Comfort Crisis, and you being a proponent of the need to get uncomfortable to some point. You talk about that. We live indoors. We're in temperature regulated homes and offices and cars and whatnot. And one of your chapters is about adaptability. And that's been an interesting topic for me because from a psychological standpoint, we've got a lot of focus around resilience, being resilient, being able to bounce back in essence. And yet I found myself giving more attention to, I want to be adaptable. I want to be able to adapt moment by moment so I don't fall down and have to be resilient in that sense.
Right.
But we are less adaptable than ever, it feels like.
Right. And, you talk about resilience, but like resilience needs to be practiced and trained. So, if you did, let's say you were going to Florida, and if you did some training, some like heat adaptation training for like a week, you'd feel a lot better when you got there.
Yeah.
So it's not like resilience isn't just like you have to go to Florida and braze in the heat and kind of suck it up, but it's like you're prepared for it, with intention. And resilience isn't just like something that happens. Like you have to build it.
Which I'm going to have to make the effort to do because it's not going to present itself in my life. I'm going to have to seek out heat, and let me start. I wanted to hit that too. I mean, I do not have exposure at this point in my life. It's been a long time to heat, to intense heat. I mean, really last summer, last August, we went to Florida. And to me, it was oppressive. It literally was. I mean, going outside, I felt like I can't breathe. Running out in it was ridiculous since I went super early in the morning. And so I lived this life of cold weather. And reading your book, wondered, what would you tell me? What am I missing out on overall? What am I missing out on by not exposing myself to heat, by not training myself with heat?
Right. It depends what your goals are. But so let's start like as an athlete. So heat training, and by heat training, I mean deliberately, going out and riding or running or whatever. And so that your body temperature gets elevated. Right. And you do that for, 4 or 5 days or maybe 5 sessions over a week. And you start building up heat adaptation. So that helps you tolerate heat, right, better. But it also builds your sort of aerobic capacity. So it's like a training multiplier. So it's like if I came and spent a week riding my bike around your house at 9,000 feet, I'd develop greater aerobic capacity because of the altitude. It's similar. It's like altitude training. So that's one benefit. Another benefit, when you get that heat adaptation going, you activate these things called heat shock proteins, which I've been fascinated with for like 15 years. And they're like little doodads in your cells that essentially like maintain the rest of the cell. So it's like the maintenance department. Or somebody described them to me as mommy proteins. They take care of the other proteins and other little machines in your cells, clean your cells out. Everything becomes more stress resistant, more resilient, and you're more resistant to heat stroke. But it also has been found to improve things like liver disease. Heat shock protein activation can help slow down and potentially reverse, play a role in fixing liver disease. So that it's a powerful mechanism that it's a powerful stress response that we have that makes us stronger and healthier.
I've got family who live in California, live in Florida. I've lived in Costa Rica, very hot, over in Africa, very hot places. They love it and have brought up the idea of detox, which you talked about in the book as well. Because from a sweat standpoint, in the summer, do I sweat? Sure. But at, 9,000 feet, most of my activities is going to be 9,000, 9,500 feet around that. That's where I live. And what sweat you do have evaporates really quickly, but a lot we don't. So having that just full out sweat, like being in the South, seldom happens. And so that concept of detox with sweat, I'm aware of, but it doesn't exist in my life. Again, wondered what I'm missing out on.
Well, I think the idea of detoxing via sweating is something that sort of mainstream scientists and physicians would say is not really a thing. You're not actually eliminating toxins in any greater concentration than they're present in your blood. So let's say you drank a bunch of beers last night, you're going to sweat out some alcohol, metabolites the next day, but it's not a preferential way of getting rid of toxins. However, you do feel purified. And I think it has to do with basically your pores are cleaner, your skin's cleaner, your skin feels better. So as a result, you feel better. Yeah. You feel, you sit in a sauna or you go, do something sweaty and you feel kind of like purified. And I think people mistake that for actual detoxification.
Okay.
Sorry. And it's a big myth out there that people talk about. Huge myth.
That's why I'm asking. And yeah, go ahead.
And I'll add a caveat. So the reason I'm not 100% sure about this because, like Brian Johnson did some interesting, self experiments, right? He's kind of fascinating. But he did a whole sauna protocol and he did very expensive tests to measure his own levels of like heavy metals and various toxins, before and after. And he found a reduction after his sauna protocol. So to me, that's like, maybe there's something there that we don't quite understand. So, one thing I learned from some of my previous books is that, we never really have a final answer on a lot of these questions.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a mistake to like kind of shut the door completely on the possibility that maybe sweating does, or exertion or heating up, hyperthermia, maybe it does trigger some kind of purification process. It's a possibility.
Well, I'm interested in the psychological aspect of it, like you've talked about, that socially people open up because, again, I'm used to the cold. And if we're going to do anything, it's a bunch of guys and we're diving in a river to wash off at a campsite. And it's freezing. It's take your breath away, absolutely frigid. And it's not an opening type thing. I mean, maybe the sharing the extremities together, is bonding or whatnot, but you're not opened up. I mean, you're literally closed up, restricted. And so when you talked about, especially these communal saunas where people tend to open up and literally to open up verbally and psychologically to some degree, I find interesting. Even thinking about the vibe of warm climates compared to cold, I see that social aspect. What I want to relate it to a psychological opening. It seems like something's there.
Yeah, for sure. Like your body's relaxed. If you're wearing fewer clothes, in a sauna, there aren't like status markers, right? There's a Scandinavian saying, like, you don't bring your wallet into the sauna.
Yeah.
Nobody knows who's the CEO and who's the janitor, right? So there's that equalizing effect, but then there's something physiological / psychological that seems to happen. They did these interesting studies, and they're still doing these studies where they heat people up with people who have severe depression. So they put them in a little like infrared box and heat them up to like a certain body temperature, like 101.5 or 101.3, something like that. And then they found that cuts their depression symptoms like in half, right? But then the other thing that happens that they noticed is that people started talking. These really depressed people just started chit-chatting away, after being heated up. And these aren't like talkative people. And so it like unlocked something. And so there's other studies going on that are kind of like exploring that, like using heat as a potential, like a preface to talk therapy. So to getting people to share more, talk more.
Okay, let's play with this, Bill, because I'm sitting here thinking about a correlation. All right. I don't have the book next to me, but I recently had a guy on the show, professor at Stanford, who just wrote a book on meaning, and he's been at Stanford teaching for about 40 years. And he said they are experiencing the loneliest student populace ever. We keep hearing stuff about this, but I really appreciated seeing a guy who's sat in a classroom with a bunch of kids for 40 years. And he's saying, yeah, we recognize it, and they rate themselves as the loneliest ever. Okay. So let's take that along with all the loneliness and isolation that we know the stats, we know the research are in our culture. It seems, and I hadn't thought about it till reading your book, that we are we're less inclined to endure heat. Here where I live, you just for heat, keeping the thermostat down, you keep it colder. I keep it about 66 in my house for some reason, is where we kind of settled on it. And you're normally enclosed, and we sit down on the couch to watch a show. You pull a blanket up. When we're in Florida, they keep the air conditioner on so high that we freeze. Yeah. We go over there and it's frigid inside. And I think about that. What is the propensity for that? We wear lots of clothes. We go to work in hot places, and we're in suits and ties with the air conditioner cranked, and then trying to keep from sweating in anything. So it's cold, 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 cold. So we seem averse to heat more than even cold to that sense. And the correlation with isolation, I'm curious.
Well, I mean, you can be together in air conditioning, but there's a fear of heat on a number of levels. Like sweat is kind of stigmatized, right? You don't want to show up to a party or a job interview all sweaty. And then I think there's just an aversion to discomfort of any kind. Like we won't walk a half a mile to the grocery store. Yeah. I just did that. I just drove to the grocery store. It's like 3/4 of a mile. And I felt like, what am I doing? We avoid discomfort of any kind. And heat, is uncomfortable. And I prefer, I'm a winter guy myself. And so part of what motivated this was to kind of get out of my own comfort zone and test that story that I had always told myself as a person and as an athlete, that I don't like the heat. And then it sort of led to this weird sort of this, I didn't expect that heat would have an effect on depression, or I didn't expect it to be like a social thing either. But if you go to there are all these bathhouses in New York City right now, just dozens of them that have opened up. And if you go, everybody there is 25. And so it's a lot of these young people who had to go to school in COVID and sit at a desk like the one I'm sitting at, looking into a screen. They're craving connection, and they find it in these bathhouses.
Which is curious to me too, because the propensity with whether we're talking cold plunge or heat is you buy your own. You buy your own, so you have it at your house, and you go in and you do it solitary, or even if it's provided at a gym, sometimes it's a solitary, ice plunge or a solitary sauna, whatever, and not the communal aspect. So with that, I mean, I don't have, of course, I live in a small town, granted, but I wonder, even if I go down to Colorado Springs, are there such things available? I don't know. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's not.
More and more there are. 3 years ago when I started this, there weren't really any sauna places in Salt Lake City. And now there's half a dozen to choose from. And, I've specifically avoided getting my own sauna. Everybody asks this at our house, just so I have to go out. Because, I work at home. I spend enough time at home. I don't need to spend more time at my house. So there's a couple places I go to, and sometimes, there's few people there. Sometimes it's crowded,
The aspect of creating it, just looking at, you said that a minute ago, that we avoid discomfort.
Yeah.
And I mean, I go out to push myself, but here's my example for my own psyche. We were at Fruta, Colorado, famous for mountain biking.
Love it.
Yeah. And you can go up, what's it called? It's like Area 23 or Road 23 or
Road 18. Yeah.
Okay.
We shouldn't.
Shh,
Yeah.
don't tell anybody. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you go up there. And so you can, you're going to go up and down and up and down, and you can go up on the road. Well, right next to the road is a trail. And I'm thinking, we're out there to get a workout. And yet I so struggled to be on the trail because it's just easier on the road and faster, and we can get up and then go down. And thought,
Yeah.
when the comfortable option is next to us, it's so hard to do to just by proxy choose discomfort.
Yeah. I mean, so Dan Lieberman at Harvard,
Yeah.
he published a great book a couple of years ago, maybe 3-4 years ago at this point, called Exercised. And it basically argued that, yeah, we're great at like running, endurance exercise. Exercise is good for us. Our ancestors did a lot of, and our hunter-gatherer relatives did and do a lot of physical activity. But like, we don't want to. Like, we want to like save energy and conserve calories, essentially. That was a survival mechanism. So the whole book was about like why we don't like to exercise and why we don't like to work harder and why we take the road instead of the hard trail. So don't feel bad. You're normal.
Yeah, one of your endorsements for the show or for the book is Dan Buettner, of course, the Blue Zones. And this concept, I think that's what really solidified it, was reading his book and realizing these people aren't exercising. Like, they're not artificially creating hardship on themselves. Their life is exercise. But like you, so I do live now down in my small town, and the grocery store is about 1.1 miles from me. And I have to make myself walk, or I've got a bike with a basket on it to go over there. I have to make myself, because the car's right there. And it's just so easy to hop in. And yet, if I didn't have the option, it'd be so much easier. My life would be, if I had to go down and get water for the day, but I don't. It comes out of the tap. These things that we've comforted ourselves, obviously, into such a hole.
Yeah. And the thing I like about the Blue Zone sort of approach is that, I mean, the sort of the basic message is you're making these kinds of practices like part of your life. So like ride your bike to the drugstore if you can. Like, it's not hard. It probably doesn't even take any longer. Or like have good food, cook good food, whole foods. Don't eat stuff out of a box. Just kind of make it part of your life. And then sauna and these heat bathing practices are kind of the same, right? They're just part of life. And so when they did these studies in Finland looking at people's sauna use, they actually they couldn't find people who did not use sauna. So there's no like control group of people who don't use sauna. The lowest level was like once a week. The people who said they did it once a week. So that's how like pervasive that practice is.
It's like the Roman baths. That's what I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You just go once a week, twice a week.
And it's so, I mean, I'm glad to hear that it's growing in places, but yeah, it's so foreign. I mean, so foreign to me. Again, I'm in a small town up in a mountain town, but the concept is so foreign. And even just back to the discomforting ourselves and riding, like riding a bike or walking. I'm trying to walk more. I had your
me too.
friend Michael Easter on the show, so I'm trying to walk more.
Yeah.
And I'll admit, sometimes I feel kind of like a hobo. Like, are people going by looking at me?
Because you're like the only one out there.
Did your car break down, or are you homeless? It's one or the other, because otherwise, why the hell are you walking?
Yeah.
And
or you got a DUI. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah. And I feel like that because it's so abnormal. There's nobody else out there walking. These things are still, it behooves us then to find our blue zones.
Yeah. And, it's interesting that people, like Americans, gravitate. Like, we love places where we have to walk. So people go to New York City and they walk around. They get like 10,000 steps in a day.
Yeah.
Or, Paris, or even somewhere like San Antonio, right? They have a whole walking area. Disney World, people walk. We like to walk. It's like we have, in a lot of places, there's not like infrastructure to support it.
Yeah. Yeah. Where I live, there's not for that or for riding bikes either. There's not, we got these little roads and big SUVs pulling trailers with all the mountain toys on it. And it's kind of dangerous a lot of
totally.
times. So I try to stay off the roads. I mean, this, again, looking at, I continue to come back. Your book I helped myself with just coming back to my humanity. I am a human. I am kind of created to do stuff with my body, to feel things with my body. And this isolation, we're back to the comfort crisis kind of idea from Michael Easter. I don't see the sum benefit.
And, sweating is one of our fundamental human traits. It's this is these genes for these special sweat glands that we have, that no other animal really has. It's like 1 million years old, at least, this ability. So, and you could argue that our ability to sweat is sort of, like I said, it's like a foundation on which we built our ability to hunt and then grow bigger brains and then use better tools and develop complex thought and complex societies, all built on our ability to sweat.
Yeah.
That's cool, right?
It is. And on both sides, I want to be able to endure it. When I go to Mexico and it feels pretty oppressive, I spend most of my time about 2 feet away from the beach the whole time so I can cool off. But to see the people there who are generally, guys out there working, doing landscaping or whatever, and they're in long pants, long shirts, they've got a hat on, and they just exist well. And then you can say the same thing in the very cold regions where people are out there, they're lightly clothed in frigid temperatures. And the ability I do look at just for overall, like you mentioned earlier, what's the goal? And my goal is just overall well-being. I want to feel well and I want to function well. I'm not competing these days. I just want to, and I want to feel. I want to feel.
Yeah. It's like if like people from Los Angeles go skiing in Colorado, right? They wear inappropriate footwear and they're freezing and they wear the wrong clothing, they're not adapted to the cold, right? They can't handle the cold. Where was I going with that?
It's just the acclimation. Yeah.
Yeah. So, a big reason I did this is because, like I said, I had this story that I didn't tolerate heat, didn't do well in the heat. I live in kind of a hot place, but really it started by just going to the sauna in the gym, which was like not a great sauna. Just your typical gym sauna. I just liked how I felt. It was comforting. We had an especially cold, snowy winter that year. And I had some stuff going on, like work-wise, and just wasn't feeling so great. And so I started going to the sauna, and the sauna made me feel better. And so I started wondering why.
Well, what I recognize in your book, very much to me, comparable to Michael Easter, talking about, comfort crisis, or talking about his recent book that we had him on, Walking with Weights, and his case that we've always done that. Same thing with James Nestor, who endorsed your book. Historically, we breathe with our mouths shut. And I thought of, who is it? Christopher McDougall, was Born to Run. As another one saying for all of time, we were barefoot or not in supportive shoes. All these things. And now to your point too, heat, for the span of humanity, this huge span, we've endured all these things. That was part of life. It's just short amount of time we're in right now where we don't participate in these environments, in these physiological realities. We've gotten away from, we've evolved past them. It doesn't seem to be helping us.
Right. And if you look at the past, like those things weren't necessarily framed as discomfort until we realized how much comfort we could create. So if you think about like air conditioning it was invented 125 years ago, but even like World War II, it was only in like public buildings, basically in hotter places. Wasn't nearly the prevalence that it is now. Now it's like 90% of American homes everywhere. Minnesota, Florida, Colorado have air conditioning. It's essential.
Yeah.
And it's a funny story. Like, I grew up in Washington, D.C., and my sister was a lifeguard one summer at a condo, some pool, right? So she just sat around all day in the heat and humidity. She'd come home and she wouldn't be able to tolerate the air conditioning. She'd have to sit outside for like an hour to like get ready to come inside to the AC. So the AC was the discomfort for her because she was so used to being outside.
Yeah.
And feeling, right?
I remind myself of Christopher McDougall's book, Born to Run.
Yeah.
And him talking about, here's everybody, they're doing fine. They're barefoot. They're running long distances back in this native tribe. Now you give them a pair of Nike shoes with all the cushion stuff. Of course it feels good. Cut back to comfort.
Yeah.
It's comfortable. Sure. Is it good? Well, that's different. We didn't ask that question. We just said it's comfortable. And that feels like what we continue to hear. We're asking, is it comfortable? Does it feel good? Is it convenient? Yeah. Is it improving our life? What is it adding to? And that I don't see. I mean, there's where I come to the stats. How are our well-being stats overall? They're tanking continually.
Yeah. And Chris is an old friend and an inspiration.
Yeah.
We also have to have like a technological fix for things that are perceived as problems. And it's been interesting to watch running shoes evolve, right? They went to the minimal, then they went to the super big and puffy, and now it's kind of like a smorgasbord of approaches.
It is. I buy the minimalist ones that you now pay as much or more for less materials.
Right. You're paying for what's not there.
Yeah.
That's also like a metaphor for like, I'm going to segue into like longevity practices. The last few years, right, we've seen this explosion in sort of people trying to figure out ways to get people to spend money, lots and lots of money on things that they think will help them live longer, right?
Yeah.
And if you get down to it, a lot of the basics that you need are really pretty much, I won't say free, but like next to free, right? Good food doesn't need to cost a ton of money.
Yeah.
Activities, push-ups are free. That's what I say. Going for a walk is free.
Yeah.
And most people don't do that, right?
I'm a little frustrated
that
most of my resistance training it's push-ups, it's burpees, it's all these things. And meanwhile, I don't know, God knows how much money's worth of weights just kind of sits there. It feels more and more unnecessary. I did want to bring out on the note that you just talked about, you have an entire chapter on hydration. And I wanted you to hit on that because I started thinking back to my cycling days. I mean, I started racing BMX at a national level. Let's see, what year would it have been? It would have been around 1980 or so.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm that old. We never talked about hydration. I mean, BMX bikes, we didn't do that. And then even as I started to be a cyclist, go towards elite cycling, you got a water bottle, but if anything, you're trying to do with as little as possible because it's just extra weight. And we'd get to the end of the race and get rid of those things. And it was like just enough water to get us to the end. And that's how we existed. And I never knew of somebody who was really hurt by dehydration. And then you bring us to that in the book of saying, my gosh, back to that longevity and the money that we're spending on water bottles and electrolytes. I'm going to say that. And I've been sponsored by electrolyte companies and I have appreciation, but the effort to go beyond the tap water. So tell us some about it.
Yeah. So, for old school athletes like you, the mantra was always don't drink during competition, especially at high level, intense efforts. So like marathon runners were not supposed to drink water, much, if any water, because it would like slosh around in your stomach. But then, Gatorade was invented and then people started thinking more about hydration, and then hydration became a product. And so some of the sports science bodies in the 90s came out with these hydration guidelines, right? That said, basically, drink as much as you can tolerate without, throwing up, essentially. So drink as much as you possibly could. And I was racing mountain bikes, at an amateur level. Back then, I remember we would just guzzle water like before the race, during, and, after. Just like you could not hydrate enough was the mantra. And I just remember feeling like not that great, right? Feeling like, throw up on the course or whatever. And you just thought, oh, I'm throwing up because I'm going so hard. No, I drank way too much water. And so some people ran into trouble as this messaging sort of reached your sort of recreational athletes. So people running a marathon in 6 hours, guzzling fluid the whole time. And there were some cases of hyponatremia. So essentially, like, you get diluted. Your body gets diluted. The salinity gets too low. And some people died from that, drinking too much.
Well, I didn't think about it talking about cycling. I mean, the other reason that back then we didn't drink a whole lot is because if it's a 100-mile road race, you don't want to have to pee. Peeing while you're riding the bike is difficult.
No bueno. Yeah.
I mean, we accomplished it once in a while, but I didn't want to do that. And so, we had some elite runners that trained they'd come up for high altitude training to our home for a couple of years, 2 or 3 years. And those guys would get up in the morning, they'd have tea, this Ethiopian tea that they would make with a little cream, maybe a sip of water, but it just wasn't a big deal. And then they'd go out and they'd do a marathon at high altitude. And they're out there, they're not on race pace, so it's going to take a few hours or take, more than that. But they do 20, 21 miles. There's no water. They didn't take anything with them. There was no support. They'd come back, they'd sit down, they'd have, maybe a glass of water, but it just wasn't part of their culture. Growing up in Africa, you just run and it wasn't a big deal. And then again, this place that we've gotten to where we have to, consume so much, it just doesn't make sense. And I appreciated you bringing us back to that.
Yeah. So, I mean, the elites are obviously a special case, and they're trained, right? They're used to it. So, like, if you or I go out and do that, we're going to, might feel pretty bad. But I think, everybody walking around, getting on the airplane with like a 40-ounce water bottle, or going to like a 1-hour exercise class or a 3-mile run with jugs and jugs of water, I think is like not always necessary. You might just be carrying extra weight. I will say, one place I found hydration to be like pretty important, and electrolytes, was in sauna, because you can really sweat out buckets of water, if you're spending an hour going in and out of the sauna. And so I learned that kind of the hard way. So so you have to pay attention to like, what are your water losses and what are your actual needs? And if you're doing something and you're sweating intensely, you do need to replace fluids, right? Eventually. Mm-hmm. And you do need to replace electrolytes, right? Eventually. If you're just sitting around, 70 degrees, it's not critical.
Well, I'll say, as a lifetime, fairly elite athlete, I've gotten to the place of I drink when I'm thirsty. It's pretty much.
Boom. That's why it's there. That's why thirst is there.
Yeah, fair enough.
Tells you.
Well, Bill, I thought even on anchoring the show here, I wanted to take advantage of you and your lifetime, not only living these things, but studying them, on what does a typical day look like of your, let's call it, longevity efforts. What are the things that you are taking in nutritionally? If we look at nutrition and exercise and sleep, just give me some highlights, because I wonder, what a guy like you, what supplements are you taking, if any? What exercises are you doing on average? What are you doing for sleep? Even if we just hit those three, I want to know.
Yeah. So, I'm a normal human being like everybody else. So I'm not like an optimizer. But I try to do things that make sense in my life. The healthiest thing I do and the best thing I do, the highlight of my day, is walking the dog in the morning. So it's like a mile and a half, try to go up and down some hills, try to get the heart rate going, clear out the cobwebs. I see the sun, which is fantastic. I have my little friend with me, which is good. And then we see people around the neighborhood. So it's like a little bit social. So I have my little friends, neighborhood dog friends. So that's like the pinnacle of that's my primary longevity practice: exercise, sunlight, some blood pressure lowering with the dog, social, right?
Yeah.
And then I work in the morning. I like to work in the morning when I'm like cognitively sharp. And then I hit a roadblock at some point, usually. And then I try and solve that by either, I've taken up rucking, actually, thanks to Mike.
Yeah, me too.
And I have a backpack with a bag of dog food in it. That's my rucking pack. Or I'll go for a bike ride, which I'm planning to do after we talk, in fact.
Okay.
So, yeah, then food-wise, I think a fantastic like longevity promoting skill, essential skill, is knowing how to cook. And I like cooking, so I always try to cook something, fresh yet, satisfying, right? I'll have a glass of wine also. No apologies. A little more walking. I try to walk a lot during the day, and my dog helps me. And then one thing we're working on is going to bed earlier in our house. So, I had been like a kind of a night owl, but I find that going to bed before 11 I just feel so much better the next day. Yeah. And then I also have some other practices. Like yesterday I went to, I go to this yin yoga class, and yin yoga is like super relaxing. Yoga, it's not like you're flopping around doing all the flow stuff, but you're like working into these sort of deep stretches and working on breathing. And so you get into this like flow, between your breath and your body. And that's like as close as I can get to meditation. And then I live in Utah. So, I try to do things that bring joy and activity. So skiing, and for me, mountain biking, I feel like I'm a little kid.
Yeah. Yeah.
All those practices. And then I try to do like, some strength a couple of times a week too.
Yeah. Well, we're in alignment with most all of that. The one thing that I'm lacking is anything heat wise. So my homework now, I waited till we talked. My homework now will see where the heck can I get hot in my.
Do you have a hot tub?
I don't. I do have a friend who has one. The last time I was in it was we were on a bike ride, got caught in hail, and I can't remember being that cold in a long time. And we were in the hot tub for 20 some minutes before I had to go pick a kid up, and I still didn't quite get warm enough. But I do. Yeah, I've got some folks who have that. But I may check down in the Springs. Colorado Springs is about 15, 20 miles, and see what I can find from a sauna standpoint, and even the communal aspect. So there's my next homework. I can report back to you.
You could build yourself a nice wood burning Finnish style sauna, and I'll come and visit you.
Okay,
you won't be able to get rid of me. Yeah,
fair enough. Well, we'll enjoy a glass of wine together in the sauna. How's that?
Perfect. Yeah.
All right. Fair. Hey, thank you. Thanks for putting this out. I've so enjoyed just getting educated and having something new to put in front of me and to look at it for ways. Yeah, I think about it mostly just to experience myself, to experience to comfort myself with discomfort. How's that?
There you go. I appreciate your curiosity and great questions.
Hey, thank you, Bill, for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. It was great.
Well, thanks for joining us in this discussion. That again is Bill Gifford. And the book that I was referencing here is called HOTWIRED: How the Hidden Power of Heat Makes Us Stronger. Till next time, here's to you and me making better meaning in our lives.
Yeah.